Another story from this week, Brian Nance, former Baylor defensive lineman, joined the program after, just experiencing life a little bit. Matt Rule gives him an opportunity a couple years back, brings him on. After he had brought him back on the football team, I should say, right? He was back on the football team because he had a very scattered sort of timeline in college. It wasn't just like a 4 years and done. It was kind of like an off and on sort of deal. So he'd come back, and then ultimately it ends up with him being on staff at Baylor and working in recruiting, which he's been doing now for, the past couple of years. And then, of course, Joey McGuire leaves in November, and eventually James Blanchard joins him. And, there's some GAs and stuff hired or whatever. And so all that happened in like December-ish. Well, here we are. It's April 5th. And just a couple days ago now, James Blanchard's going to Lubbock to join Joey McGuire and that whole staff there. So, Grayson, I haven't received a comment back on my comment on the board. I done my good, bad, and ugly, and the only ugly piece that I mentioned this week was just like the whole Tech and Baylor rivalry building up, and now Brian Nance is kind of the latest chapter in this. And I had somebody comment and say, like, something along the lines of, and you always wonder, like, just with typing, how things can get lost in translation. But I read it a couple times, and I'm like, I think this dude is making a comment about, like, taking me saying that was like an ugly or whatever, because I got to fill out these categories, that, God forbid Brian Nance try to make a living. And I said a very polite response back, and I could have gone so much deeper into it if I wanted to. I chose not to. This had nothing to do with Brian Nance being able to make a living, for one. And I do feel like if Baylor fans want to be a little edgy about it, they have a right to be, based on what we know, because this was just kind of unexpected. And, the problem for me is not Brian Nance going and having an opportunity. He wasn't hurting to pay bills before, so don't let that become some fake narrative out there. But he had I guess, an okay situation here and could have had a better one if maybe communication was more open. But instead, he obviously was talking to Tech a little bit, ends up going there. Okay, all that's fine and well and dandy and good. I have no issue with any of that. My issue is that he's been on campus for the last 5 months in recruiting meetings, and they're halfway through spring ball, and they're bringing in Josh White on visits, and they're planning out who they're going to be bringing in all summer, and they're planning out, like, roles, and they're planning for next year. And this guy's just sitting here the whole time. Now, he's not privy to every secret meeting, and he doesn't know, like, game plans and things like that, to my knowledge. He's a recruiter, but at the same time, this isn't him leaving and going to South Dakota State. This isn't him leaving and going to USC. You're going to a school who, for that coach to succeed, he has to beat Baylor. So it's one of those, like, had it happened right after the season, I think it would have been like, okay, cool, whatever. But the fact that it's April is like where it's kind of like, well, dang, like that's where it not hurts, but that's where it stings a little more.
Yeah, this is a big period. This is a spring evaluation period. It's going to lead into the summer as well. And the thing of it is now, Tech basically has the whole big board.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, they have the whole big board that Baylor has, all their priority targets. Now, to be honest, I don't know that really matters to Baylor at all. Like, Baylor's going to get the guys they want for the most part. Maybe some will be intrigued by Tech for sure. Like, that happens. But ultimately, Baylor is going to recruit really well, and they're going to get the guys that they want for the most part. So it's really unfortunate, though, because, he's going to go in there and have all this information that maybe Tech didn't have before. And, that's tough. I think it's also tough because he's a former Baylor player. That's not exactly something that I think Baylor fans love, the fact that he's posting, Michael Crabtree as his profile picture now and things like that. I understand that.
Dave Aranda didn't go to Baylor, and, so I get that, but that's every school deals with guys going off to coach places. I know,
but it's very fresh because he's not an old play.
No, I know. And it's targeted, and it's right next door, basically. Right. And it's a staff who's basically using the foundation of what they were doing here just 4 years ago, basically, and building it in their own way. But, yeah, there's a lot of crossover that is becoming sort of annoying at this point.
Yeah, it's a bad time for it too.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, during the timing of, all these visits that they've had kids in like every single weekend and during the week and stuff. And so, was Brian recruiting them to Tech, during that time? Hopefully not.
Would not be the first time we've heard story, not about him, but I'm just saying in recruiting, not even at Baylor necessarily, but in recruiting, that would not be the first time we've heard something like that.
Yeah, I would hope not.
I would hope not too.
Now, as far as just the move in general, I truly do think this was more of a, I don't want to say attention, but I think that when you get a different title, which is what he got at Tech, I think it was kind of big for him to the title, the praise, you know what I mean, that comes with that.
Yes,
I think that was the biggest thing. It definitely wasn't the money. For sure, it was not the money.
No.
So I think it was more so that he'll get, complete autonomy at Tech as well, because it's just the Wild West. They offer whoever they want, and that's great. But when you don't have a strict process, you end up with some guys who maybe don't pan out. And that happened at Baylor a lot. There have been a lot of guys that did not pan out for one reason or another. But this Baylor staff, they have a way of going about recruiting, and it works for them. It allows them to use person over player and truly mean it. And I think that's kind of where they're at. Now, as far as this impact with Nance, he was a very good recruiter, a very good relationship builder, for sure. He did that in multiple classes, just like James Blanchard. Both guys built really good relationships. But Baylor's biggest thing is the recruiting guys find the talent. They recruit the talent, talk to the guys, the recruits. But ultimately, a big part of Baylor's, I think, recruiting philosophy is that the position coaches are major parts of recruitments. I mean, look at what Eric Mateos has done on the recruiting trail. I mean, plenty of guys mention him as, big reasons they end up at Baylor. So I don't want to overstate it too much. I think Brian did a great job. Baylor would have loved to have had him come back. They wanted to keep him. So I think they understand his value, but I also think this Baylor staff is so well organized and such a well-oiled machine that this really is not going to hurt them on the trail. I expect them to hire someone very shortly to fill his role, and it'll probably be someone that fits the culture of the staff, maybe even a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm not worried about them replacing him. I mean, and that's no disrespect to him. It's just that, we are as guilty as anybody of overhyping guys who do roles that everybody's doing the same way across the country. It's like, oh my gosh, they're losing this guy. They'll never recruit again. It's like they're recruiting the same, if not better than ever. Oh my God, Kaz is gone. They're never going to lift weights properly again. Yeah. And it's like then people got fueled because for a while they couldn't. And then Jeremy Scott did a good job, but then now Vic Valoria, and it's like, okay, oh, well, there's more than one guy who can do that job well. So, yeah, they'll find somebody who can recruit well or help out in recruiting well. Again, it's not about even if his name was Joe Washington, we'd still be saying the same thing. It's just that, yeah, he's a Baylor guy, but it's the timing. That's the whole thing to me is the timing of it. The timing. That's what I'm harping on. Go make a living. You already were, but go make one anyways for people that want to try to paint it that way. But, yeah, it's just the timing hurts. But, hey, part of the deal, they'll get over it. Good luck to them, and they'll see each other in Lubbock coming up here in a few months. But, I mean, don't want to do the media thing and try to really blow something out of proportion and hype it up to be like so much more grave or anything that it is. But, I mean, the drums are pounding in the background for this Baylor Tech face-off, in my opinion. And maybe others see it differently. I think – my game that you had to win next year, in my opinion, was TCU. And I think it still may be because that's just a game that you need to start winning. Like, it's been ridiculous, their advantage in that series here as of late. But I do think, like, right behind that, and by the time they play, maybe if it's even number one, it might be Tech because of just the fact that, like, OU and Texas, like, it's always a big deal to beat them. But, in terms of just straight up, like, I guess like the future and whatnot, like you're going to be competing against Tech more than you're going to be competing against Oklahoma and Texas, and same thing for Oklahoma State and so on. And so they've got some momentum, and if they go win some games, they'll get a lot more. But I do think that's an important game for Baylor next year.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually think with Gary Patterson leaving, I'm not going to say that means TCU won't still have the edge, yeah. But it definitely takes, you know what I mean? Gary changed my mind Baylor on it, a lot. It felt like, especially recently. But now I'm kind of like, they got to go beat Tech.